everybody. Thank you. Welcome to Build. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri, and our next guests are the team behind the incredible new movie, Lucy in the Sky. In it, famed creator of TV's Fargo, Noah Hawley directs Natalie Portman as the title character Lucy, a woman who, after exploring space, finds herself locked into a world on Earth that increasingly makes less sense, including her relationship with a fellow astronaut played by Jon Hamm. The film is surreal, beautiful at times, and anchored by an astonishing performance by Portman, who is playing a woman who is very far from anchored herself. Let's take a look at Lucy in the Sky.
Lucy. Time to wrap it up.
Just a few more minutes. I saw my house from space. Not literally, but my life.
Yep, there it is.
Excuse me?
Major Goodwin has a theory that he can tell who's walked in space just by looking at it.
It is more than a theory.
You keep your eye on this one. She'll show you how it's done.
I'm so proud of you.
Love you to the moon and back.
You know Michael Collins,
Of course, Apollo 11 flew the command module for Neil and Buzz.
so you know that after he dropped them, he circled the moon for hours. Inside the module, he wrote, "I am now truly alone, and absolutely alone from any known life. I am it."
Fine.
Amen. I need to get back up there.
You're not getting any younger, so you're just gonna have to work harder.
Look at you. Straight arrow. You've never done a thing wrong in your life.
I've done plenty of things wrong.
Really? Hit me.
Dr. Plimpton said you skipped your last 3 sessions.
I'm giving everything to this program, to the mission.
Kills me to say it, but our girl's been pretty inconsistent recently.
Cola aboard.
Negative. I can finish.
Cola.
She's tough cookie.
Get the latch off.
Not everyone can handle the ride.
I'm pulling you out of the running for Orion.
No. If I were a man, you would...
Excuse me?
I know what you're doing, but you're gonna lose because I'm a winner. This is not a drill, cadet. Grab your stuff.
What are you doing?
With her, I'm officially beginning to worry.
You're acting so strange.
I'm good. All systems go.
What's it like up there?
Only place where anything makes sense.
I hear that.
Everybody, please welcome from Lucy in the Sky, Jon Hamm, Natalie Portman, and Noah Hawley. Let's hear it.
Yay, us.
Thank you so much for being here, you guys. Congratulations on the film. Incredible filmmaking and beautiful performances from the two. Well, a beautiful performance by you, Natalie, and a very fun performance by you, Jon. I just don't want to call your character beautiful.
Well, that's fine. I was under the impression that the title was called Lucy and This Guy. So I was woefully underinformed, but...
You saw a cut of the movie and were you disappointed by the cut of the movie that you saw? Yeah.
You named him. I mean, he wasn't just a guy.
That's true. Noah, obviously, people know you from Fargo and from Legion. What was it about space that attracted you? I would say that Legion, in some ways, stylistically lends itself to a story like this, but not entirely.
Well, perspective, I think, not on space, but on life on Earth. And, you know, we don't get many dramas that start in space that gives us that view of how small we are in comparison to the universe. And you know, what we're doing down here, when you see it in that context, and I think that for Natalie's character, when you realize how big the universe is and how small you are in relation to it, and you come home, you look at your life a little differently.
That is true. It isn't so much a space drama as much as it is a home drama, an Earth drama, for lack of a better way to put it.
Correct. Earth drama. That's what I made.
One of a couple of the incredible things that you do in this film to sort of track Natalie's character's descent in some ways is your shift of perspectives with aspect ratio, as well as a number of visual motifs that I think we've seen a little bit in Legion, less so in Fargo. But can you talk a little bit about the aspect ratio decision, where we go from widescreen, often in space or in an idea of space, to this sort of closed off 4:3-ish aspect ratio that sort of seems to be about corridors and the architecture that we live in?
Well, I think it's important that we not judge Lucy in watching this movie, that we see the world through her eyes, because she's going to make some decisions that the audience doesn't necessarily approve of or want her to make. And so as a result, I had to figure out, how can I put you into her state of mind? And some of it is literally when she's in space and everything looks enormous and she comes home and everything seems so small. That's the experience that the audience has in the theater. So the box shrinks down when she's back on Earth, and the sound moves to the center when she's on Earth. And then obviously, the closer she gets to that feeling of being back there, the screen will open up or close.
The moment that I really noticed it, I mean, I was noticing it beforehand, but is in the bowling alley when the camera sort of shoots from the back up into the front, and you start seeing that the aspect ratios are not just your decision, but they're actually the architecture from which she is sort of confined in at home. The spaces are much smaller, and your choice of ratio kind of has proven that a little bit.
The rectangle, and then
Sure,
I'm a playful filmmaker, so some of it is playful. There's definitely a moment where the box shifts to the left, and then as she goes to the right, it moves, and some of that is a bit of playfulness. But my hope is that you may notice the first couple of times, but then it just helps to pull you deeper into the film, and all you're feeling is the feeling that it's giving you.
Was that something that you had written into the script, that you knew you were shooting it that way, or was that something that you found in the edit? Because you're not changing lenses for those ratios as you're shooting, are you?
No, I mean, there are times where we had to be clever about how we were going to get like the super wide shots.
Right.
But no, that was all planned in advance as to where we were going to do it and how we were going to do it.
Natalie, what is it like tracking rarely does a film so visually try to capture a character's descent while the performer is doing it as well. What is it like to work with a director who is doing that? I mean, I'm talking not just about aspect ratio, but about a shot where you're sort of floating through time and space to the next scene, a lot of slow motion moments where you are doing everything as a performer, but the filmmaking is also doing a lot as well to capture that.
Well, it's always wonderful when you have a filmmaker who's very clued into your character's emotional state during a particular moment in the movie. So to have that reflected in the filmmaking is wonderful. You get the added energy and also the real true understanding and connection with the filmmaker you're working with, and in this case, of course, Noah's great vision and understanding of where she was at every particular moment.
You are incredible at playing high achievers who, in some ways, descend into a form of madness due to their their want to continue to achieve more and more. I have to ask, what attracts you to roles like that?
It's funny because I don't know. You probably have this experience too, where people draw threads between like the roles that you tend to play, where you don't necessarily see those connections yourself. So
it's not all the roles.
No. I'm sure it's accurate. It's just hard to have insight into your own patterns the way other people can recognize your patterns. So
yeah,
I don't know, but maybe it means that I don't know. I'm attracted to those kinds of roles. I don't know.
Well, they're probably the most juicy, fun roles to play. You get to do a lot, and you're an incredibly active character.
It's certainly interesting when you have a character who is capable and then seeing them not be capable in some way. The frustration of that, the failure, the humanity that we can all connect to of, being good at something and defining ourselves in one way and then behaving in a way that might go against all ways we identify ourselves.
Jon, you play a lovable Cad, would you say? Or just a Cad? I really like this character because I think you do an incredible job of presenting someone who could be, in some ways, a villain to her, but at the same time you get where he's coming from, and that he's just actually a fairly practical, right down the middle kind of guy who can't handle anything outside of that.
Well, yeah, I think it's the dynamics in the film are very interesting because what Natalie's character goes through is essentially an existential crisis, right? She figures out like what her life is going to be, what it is, and what it could be, and how do I move through that? What is it going to be? And I think the movie ends on an incredible note of hope and positivity because she figures out, like she eventually gets to a great place, goes through incredible transformation. Obviously, transformation's a big theme in the film as well. But if it was a man going through all of that, I think people would look at it in a very different way. And I think so. My guy has gone through a version of this transformation as well, and is perceived very differently, not only by his cohorts in the business. He doesn't suffer the circumstances that Lucy suffers. So I think that's kind of a very interesting.
Well, there's the possibility that he did suffer a version of that before. He was previously
Yeah,
married.
probably not.
Yeah. he
Like,
was just like, I'm out.
No, I think, well, yeah, a version of what you're saying, yes, of course, like goes through the emotional version, the emotional repercussions of all of that, but professionally doesn't necessarily have to deal with what a woman in that situation has to deal with, and I think that's another thing that the movie really explores and I think asks the audience to kind of look at as well.
I think one of the things that is so smart about the way that you explore it is that while you are tracking that and Lucy is talking about it, she is also going crazy. So there's this sort of juxtaposition of this person who may be right in regards to her experience, but in no way is anyone going to believe her or take her seriously because of the point that she's gotten to. Was there any, I mean, how do you track that? Because we're in this time where people want to hear empowering stories. They want to hear empowering monologues often, but you have someone giving those monologues who is essentially doing terrible things or about to do something terrible.
Well, it was important to me that even though what she says when she confronts John's character might seem crazy to him, to us, everything she's saying makes sense because of everything we've seen her go through.
Or even before that, where she's taken her niece along for this ride to break into an office and get these emails, and you're delivering this amazing monologue about what it's like to be called an emotional woman, while meanwhile she is being wildly emotional and doing something that people would look down on.
Well, I mean, I think what I wanted to look at is the no-win scenario that she's put in, and as a person who has never failed in her life at anything, to suddenly be put into a situation in which she can't win, she just refuses to accept it, right? She designs a mission for herself that she's going to go on that's going to fix the problem, but of course it's an unfixable problem, so the mission is not necessarily rational. But
it's not even really tangible what exactly the mission is, which I loved.
I mean, I think it's important to tell empowering and inspiring stories, but I also think that it's important to tell stories about a woman having an existential crisis who fails without being stoned to death for it, without being judged for it.
You don't do that.
Yeah, I mean that she's able to go through this experience and come out the other side of it humbled and having learned something. I mean, I think it's critical that we're able to tell those stories.
Natalie, can you talk about doing that scene in particular? I loved that scene with the niece inside John's office where you're going through his emails, and you were talking about what it's like to be criticized for being too emotional as a woman in this field. Yet, as I said, you are being wildly emotional at this moment. Can you talk about that scene?
Well, I do love that it's not black and white. It's not, she is justifiably incensed at how she's been treated, and you can see it's different. I mean, Noah had me watch The Right Stuff before we started to kind of get that the vibe between astronauts, all these guys hazing each other, being kind of like cocky and having this swagger and competing really a lot with each other. And it's so charming among the guys. And you see it between the women, and it kind of seems catty. And you realize that like the same behavior can be categorized completely differently between men and women. And that's sort of what happens in the movie, is that, you know, these guys are all daredevils. You know, the first men who went to space, they agreed to strap themselves to a bomb. You know, it's this extreme. They're also brilliant scientists and pilots and engineers, but they also were daredevils. And then when she does something that's kind of daredevil with her pool training, she's reprimanded for it as being reckless. And so you see that kind of the same qualities that might be celebrated in one might be, put down in another gender. And so she is losing it, but it's kind of a normal reaction to lose it when you're facing injustice.
Do you think that in some ways her approach to John's character and her falling into this affair has to do with her also wanting to be accepted by the men in that way, also wanting to be sort of part of the team, part of that camaraderie?
That's interesting.
Like there's no other way to sort of be within this club that he talks about except for the way that he is. I mean, he's clearly putting moves on her, and in order for her to sort of be in this comfortable club.
It's definitely a valid interpretation. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I thought of her really connecting to someone who is in a very rare and unique position of having had the same experience, of having been to space and having had this experience of wonder and awe, and also realizing how small we are and connecting on that level and wanting and needing that connection. And then, of course, it isn't what it seems.
Right, he's not looking for much connection at all. Would you say that?
Well, no, I think I think that they're sure he's looking for some sort of connection, which he succeeds in getting. But
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're talking.
never
What
mind.
does this mean?
Never mind. No, there is some sort of deep-seated sort of yearning, I think, for the people in this position to be understood and to understand each other, and I think that is the connection, so to speak. And I think when that sort of pebble rolls down the hill, then all of a sudden the avalanche follows. In the sense of there's a need there on both sides to be understood, to be heard, to be sort of to have that common conversation. And then they're both like sexual beings. Like it is what it is. Like there's that version of it too. So I think that it's very commonplace, a lot of this, but also it's very unique in its specificity, because they are in this very, very unique fraternity of people that are, what's a fraternity with men and women? Sorority? Whatever. It's a group.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, that's right. You're welcome.
The
You're
future,
welcome,
the
English
sorority.
speakers.
Inclusive fraternity sorority thing.
Sorority.
How did you guys? One of the things that I like about your performance, John, and about the character is that as much as he is this cad, this kind of ladies' man, which he's actually referred to in the movie, there is a sense of his humanity and who he is, and that he's not an overall bad person. How did you track that to make sure that he didn't come off as one-dimensional by the time that the film ended?
Well, I think it's in the script, and I think Noah did an amazing job at allowing these characters to be not one-dimensional. Allowing them to be not judged. I think that there's an easy version of this movie that's made where I am the sort of mustache twisting Lothario who comes and breaks up a marriage or whatever, but that's not.
Or was intentionally trying to get her off the program to get somebody else on, which is not.
That's not.
He was actually trying to do what he thought was the best for the program.
That's not the story that we're trying to tell. I think it's just.
Yeah, I think you also have to. If she's the only one in the movie who's going through something, then she just seems crazy to us. But the reality is, we see John's character watching and rewatching the Challenger explosion. It's clear that all these astronauts are wrestling with some form of fear or transformation that they're going through. And in order for Natalie's character not just to seem like a crazy person, it's important that we see that. And, there are no heroes or villains. They're just people making choices. So I wanted to the audience to feel that.
I think there's a lot of great lines in the movie, and I told you this in the room. I think my favorite line in the movie is when you're in the throes of somewhat of a jealous rage, amongst other things, and you say, "I read your emails while you were in space." One, it's just a funny line on the surface, but two, it's also a really apt, sort of succinct way to describe what she's going through in that moment, which is like all of the things on the ground that would emotionally affect a person with this other incredibly heightened big idea. And so it's very silly, while at the same time it captures everything about the duality of what's happening in her head. Can you talk about writing a line like that, knowing that it'll work, and also performing a line like that? Because it could be played
Right.
for a laugh. I mean, I did giggle because I liked it so much, but that's...
Yeah, I mean, but it's we begin to feel that the choices that she's making are a little less rational than they would be. I mean, when she's taken off the program, her first instinct is to call him, and she gets his voicemail, and he says, "I can't come to the phone right now because I'm in outer space." You know, it shows you just how desperate she is to talk to him, even though it's clearly she knows he's in space, but she just needs that connection. You know, I think that the calibration on the script level and performance level has to be about empathy and putting you into her shoes, because if you're walking in her shoes, you can't judge her the same way. And audiences don't tend to like people who have affairs, and you know, so there are many.
Sometimes they do.
So, yeah, if it's Jon Hamm, they do. But you know, there are many points in which there's a risk of losing the audience. You know, I told you not to go in the basement. You went in the basement anyway. And so it was really important to just try to keep you with her, and you know, humor is another way to do that.
Those are my favorite types of characters, are the ones that do all of the wrong things and spiral out of control.
That says a lot about you.
It's true. Can you talk about that scene and that line and bringing it to life, and maybe finding some of the humor in it while at the same time making sure that it's as grounded as possible and where that character is coming from?
Yeah, well, it is like their day to day, like, oh, you were in space yesterday, now you're here, and that's normal. And also, just I think it's such a human thing that you can grasp the largeness, the vastness of the universe, but still be caught up in the most petty, feet on the ground, dumb issues, you know? Like, we're aware of climate change, and you're like mad at your coworker, you know, and that's what you think about all day. Or like you know that there's all this stuff about like psychiatrists in war zones. People will talk to them about their love lives. Right. You know, they're like literally facing complete disaster, and they'll be like, "Oh, this guy really broke my heart," you know. And it's amazing. It's like an amazing human quality that, even when you're aware of these kind of large existential issues, it's like tiny daily life things that are the heart of what we care about.
Yeah. It's intimacy and the relationships that we have with each other.
Yeah.
One person who's not on the stage who we haven't mentioned yet, who I think is so great in the movie, is Dan Stevens, who's given a mustache, and I don't think I've ever seen him play the dutiful husband.
No one handed it to him. He grew that mustache.
Did he really?
Oh yeah, that's not a fake mustache. That is his face.
You've worked with Dan on Legion. What made you cast him in this role?
Well, because I didn't want just the sort of like Ned Flanders nice guy husband for her. He needed to be an empathetic, fully rounded character as well. And
you didn't want the Ned Flanders, and you asked him to
grow a mustache. Yeah, well, I like to give him challenges, and you know, that's the thing is, I'm always attracted to ensemble storytelling because I feel like a story is richer when you see multiple points of view, and certainly multiple points of view on Natalie's character. So, you know, that's why there are scenes in there in which we really feel what it must be like for Dan to be living with Lucy. You know, when she says, you know, he's talking about her being in space, and she says, "I came back," and he says, "No, I don't think you did." You know, that there's something, he sees what she's going through. He doesn't know how to reach her, but he sees it, and I think that's better.
I love the scene in the car where she has no space for him anymore for lack of a better word, and he is trying so hard to reach her, and you primarily keep him out of focus. What was the decision behind that? Because he is doing so much performing in that scene. I mean, his heart is breaking on camera, and we can see his chin quivering. Yet you primarily keep him out of focus, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we just stay in the one shot over him to Natalie. You know, there's the size of his performance and the amount of feeling. You know, it's really important if we're staying in Natalie's point of view to really stay with her. I felt like with that, and you know, there's a power to it also. You know, I'm primarily concerned as a storyteller anymore with human dignity and the fact that if you think about what a tabloid story is, right? It's a story about human beings with dignity who have made mistakes and potentially ruined everything and then been turned into a punchline. And my goal with this movie is to try to give the dignity back, you know, to Lucy but also to Dan and to John's character. And you know, it's the film, you know, as fun as it sounds, is really a tragedy. These decisions that people make and their lives are ruined, and you know, Lucy's punishment is she doesn't get to do the things she loves the most anymore. So we don't need to judge her or mock her for it.
I don't want to spoil anything, but did you think of the ending in some ways as a challenge in the sense that it could be a punchline in terms of where Lucy goes? Not the final moments, but the climax of the movie. It could be in some ways a comic punchline as to how far she goes, yet you are trying to sort of infuse that dignity and consistently have it there?
You know, it's as close as she can get to that experience of being in space on Earth on some level, but it's also a very grounded place to leave her. So, you know, hopefully there's something, you know, poetic about it that is not, you know, we didn't tack a happy ending onto the movie. The reality is,
oh no, not that part.
Yeah.
Sorry, in the garage.
Oh,
where she's got the wig. You know, she's sort of spiraled completely. And there's a kind of comedy to it, but at the same time, that's that tabloid punchline that you're talking about, and trying to make sure that there's still dignity there.
Well, you know, again, to track it from her point of view and as much as possible. But you know, Natalie can also speak to that, because we talked a lot about what we didn't want this movie to turn into, you know, which is the sort of thriller version in which, you know, this poor guy has some crazy woman after him now. You know, I think that was always the challenge with it, was how do you take someone who was on top of the world and get them to a mugshot and really understand that journey.
Can you talk about that, what you didn't want and what that means for your performance in that final scene?
Well, we didn't want like a Fatal Attraction kind of, you know, she's going crazy over a guy or she's like a villain, because it's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot, and it's a lot more out of almost identification with this new female astronaut that he's engaging with, like almost an opportunity to stop someone from going down the same path, and that kind of approach to it, as opposed to some kind of like jealous, scorned woman, which is like a, you know, quite a sexist trope also, like not to play into that, was definitely a conversation we had.
Well, yeah, and I think that your performance isn't even playing into that either in that moment. There's one line that is hilarious that plays into that, but primarily your character's focused actually on Lucy's mental health, and you're saying the right things that she should do and she should think about. She's just too far gone to hear you.
Yeah, I think the main thrust of it is that it was just played very real. Like, this person is going through something and has placed themselves in a position, and everyone else is reacting to it, and then it spirals wildly out of control, and we wonder, is she going to take her own life? Is she going to take someone else's life? What's going to happen? She bought a fucking hammer and you know, all this. You're like, what's going to happen? Sorry, am I allowed to say fuck?
You can swear, yeah, you can say fuck.
Fuckity fuck.
Well, not that many times.
Well, great. No, the FCC is going to call us. But anyways, it's just real, and it's real people reacting to each other in real time, and I think that all three of our characters during that scene are very much, off kilter, and Natalie's performance is phenomenal in it because it's happening in real time to her. So yeah, I think that's to get back to Noah's point is replacing these kind of punchline moments in our clickbait society with human beings who are actually going through human emotions.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm going to go to questions in just a second, but I think what I love about that scene as well is that talking to you right now, you have a clear sense of what Lucy was maybe trying to accomplish in that scene. I, as a viewer, did not have that clear sense, and that's what I loved about that scene was that when people are having a breakdown like that, when something like that is happening, to anybody who's not in the midst of that breakdown, it's unclear what they want and how they're going to get it and what's going to happen. It's all chaos. Yeah. A couple questions from the audience. Who's a question? Right here.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I have a question for Natalie. I was thinking about Plato's allegory of the cave, and I was wondering, what did you draw from in terms of experiencing something that expands your consciousness so dramatically, like going to space and having to be thrown back into normal life and finding it jarringly mundane and unrelatable? Like, where did you summon that alienation from?
Wow, that was a very, very well stated question. Thank you. Obviously, I haven't been to space. I can imagine, and I've watched documentaries and tried to ponder how that experience would be just completely mind expanding and hard to recover from. I think in real life, I have, as we all have, moments of transcendence, of wonder, of awe, of beauty, that, sometimes a creative experience, sometimes an experience in nature, sometimes an experience with my children gives me that moment of extreme awe. And then you're like, back to picking up your dog's poop and you're like, really? How'd I get here? I was just there. And so I think that's something we can all relate to, even if none of us have been to space, obviously. I mean, I'm making assumptions, but I'm hopefully accurate.
Next question.
Hi, Natalie. It's also for you. You've had a lot of varied characters over your career. Is there any character or genre that you've not tried yet that you're dying to try?
I would love to do an animated film. I've never done a voice in an animated movie.
Really?
How is that possible?
Yeah.
I have never had the opportunity to be a voice in an animated movie. How many have you done, John? Many,
like
right?
5.
Yeah.
I mean, not movies, but TV. That's crazy to me that you have not done that.
Yeah.
Not possible.
Well, tell someone who can help
I'm
me.
I'm genuinely shocked.
Where's Chris Melandandri when you need him?
One more.
Illumination. Don't worry about it. I did Minions.
Hi, my name is Tiffany, and my question is for all of you. So, throughout all your careers thus far, what has been your greatest accomplishment?
Go, Noah.
Well, obviously, working with Natalie and John is my greatest accomplishment.
John's animated movies.
I've done so many animated movies, you guys. It's really the best. Lovely question, and thank you so much. But earnestly and honestly, my experience was that was sort of life and career changing. Was getting cast on Mad Men and having that be a sort of cultural force that it became. We obviously didn't know that was going to happen when we did it. We just wanted to make a cool TV show. And it turns out we did. So that kind of set a lot of things in motion that I was very pleased to do, and I kind of owe it all to that. But Nat?
I love Mad Men.
No, you're right.
Can I ask a question about Mad Men really fast?
Let Natalie finish her answer.
Okay,
it's
go
so
ahead,
good.
Natalie.
You're so good on it. I'm a big fan. I love it.
Oh, I can't. Okay. Very, very, very briefly, because I rewatched the pilot for Mad Men not that long ago, because I watch it regularly. It's one of the great pilots ever written. When you guys went to shoot it, was there any sense of rewriting it or figuring it out, or what
Not
was
at all.
it? Shoot the pilot. It's already written.
We very rarely had blue pages on, meaning rewrites on that show, and we certainly didn't have them on the pilot. We shot the pilot in 2005, I think. Whoa, 14 years ago.
I mean, it is a perfect pilot.
Woof. That means I'm older than dirt. We shot it here in New York City. It was the only part of the show that we shot in New York City, and yeah, it was as written. And I remember reading the pilot and finishing it and thinking it was really good, and then rereading it from page one again, and, like, making sure that did I really like this much? It's like, am I rewriting it in my head? No, I liked it.
Yeah. Natalie,
And I thought, what movie star are they going to cast in this part?
Natalie, did you want to answer the original question about?
Sure. For me, I think directing a film, made a film called A Tale of Love and Darkness a few years ago, and I acted in it as well. And making that was a really incredible turning point, because I feel like I understood acting in a new way from having to watch myself over and over in a way I had kind of resisted before.
Is there any? Are you planning on making another one, directing another movie?
Yes.
Okay.
You should do an animated one.
I'm going to
cast
star in it.
yourself.
You're gonna star in it.
I'm going to star in it.
One more.
Hello. Natalie, this question's for you. I was wondering about in your upcoming role as Thor, what are you most excited about doing in that movie, or just being the iconic character?
Apparently they improvise a lot, which I'm really excited about. And Tessa and Chris, who worked with Taika on the last one, were telling me that it's just very funny, and you have to try hard not to laugh the whole time, which sounds really fun.
Thank you.
Guys, I love the film. Congratulations. Incredible work. When can people see Lucy in the Sky?
Starting Friday.
This Friday,
In
Lucy in
select
the
cities
Sky.
and expanding the following weekend.
Amazing. Everybody give them a huge round of applause for
Thank
coming
you.
by.
Thank you, everybody.